Welcome to the Thinking Practitioner Podcast,
a podcast where we dig into the fascinating issues, conditions, and quandaries in the massage and manual therapy world today.
I'm Whitney Lowe.
And I'm Luchau.
Welcome to the Thinking Practitioner.
And thank you again for joining us on the Thinking Practitioner podcast, where Books of Discovery has been a part of the massage therapy and bodywork world for over 25 years. Nearly 3,000 schools around the globe teach with their textbooks, e-textbooks, and digital resources. Books of Discovery likes to say that learning adventures start here, and they find that same spirit here on the Thinking Practitioner podcast and are proud to support our work, knowing that we share the mission to bring the massage and bodywork community thought-provoking and enlivening content that advances our profession.
Instructors of manual therapy education programs can request complimentary copies of Books of Discovery's textbooks to review for use in your programs. Listeners like you can explore their collection of learning resources for anatomy, pathology, kinesiology, physiology, ethics, business mastery, etc. at booksofdiscovery.com, where listeners save 15% by entering thinking at checkout. Hey, Whitney, we got a guest today. Tell us about him.
Yes, we're looking forward to having some time with our guests today. If you have ever felt overwhelmed by the contradictory information in the world of rehab and pain relief and manual therapy in particular, our guest today is your guide through the noise. So Paul Ingraham is joining us today, the publisher of PainScience.com, who is a former massage therapist and science writer and educator in Vancouver, British Columbia, is joining us to help clinicians in their quest to kind of see how accurate information can best be gathered to inform our clinical practice. So, Paul, welcome to Thinking Practitioner Podcast. Great to have you here.
Thank you. Nice to be here. I like that introduction.
All right. Okay. Well, I want to go into a little bit of background here first as we get kind of started. You started as a massage therapist in Vancouver before becoming a science writer. Tell me, what was that sort of transition like? What was there kind of like a turning point that made you kind of move more toward writing education things as opposed to doing clinical work?
Yeah, around 2007 when I first started getting paid to write. Nothing like a paycheck to encourage someone to keep doing. Yeah, but I was always a writer. I had been a writer for many years before. Not a successful writer, mind you, but it is, of course, normal and standard for writers to start out with a strong writerly identity and no income from it. So I went into massage therapy because I wanted a good day job, and it was a good day job. And the part that I didn't see coming was that I ended up writing about my work as a massage therapist. I got excited about what I was doing and the intellectual puzzles that I found inside my career. My new day job turned out to be way more interesting than I expected, and it kind of hijacked my interest.
Oh, yeah, so that writing thing could never go away. It was there all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. So, my whole life, everything I do, I have to write about it. So at some point I figured out, I guess I'm a writer.
Right. Yeah. So how do you kind of view yourself now in relation to this work? I mean, I know a lot of the things that you've published have been things that have, for example, challenged a lot of the traditional narratives in our field, but do you see yourself more as kind of like a person informing the profession, or somebody still inside this trying to, work at it and expand our understanding from inside?
Oh, I'm a hybrid. It's, you can't spend as much money as I did on my education. You can't do 10 years of clinical work without feeling like an insider. I mean,
yeah.
I was a massage therapist, but it's been a long time. It's been 15 years since I was last working as a clinician. And so that feeling is fading, and more I do feel a little bit like an outsider. Also, I engage with other professions more and more often as I progress in my career. I'm writing about a much wider range of topics than I would have dared to attempt back then. So yeah, I'm spreading out more and more. I don't feel like I'm in the massage therapy club anymore, but I still have a foot really firmly in it. I mean, there was just too many years when that was my identity.
Yeah. One of the things that I wanted to ask you about, I was trying to go back and I'd read through all this stuff that was on your site. Were you the one that coined the term modality empire?
I think that was me, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm quite confident of it. I've got about 3 terms that I believe I've coined. They're now somewhat widely used.
Yeah.
And modality empires is one of them.
Well, I want to touch base on that a little bit because, the way that a lot of continuing education is taught and, methods are shared in our profession is around specific techniques and modalities, and people often get very identified with their particular approaches. And we've learned from research, I think all of us, anybody who's been, looking at research and reading stuff for the last couple of decades has probably had to shift or change something that they came upon that might be different from what they were taught, or maybe something that was part of an ingrained system that they really saw themselves identified with. But how can you kind of, as a practitioner, separate like who you are from the things that you were taught, or the sort of the things that you identify with as a system or methodology? Or do you need to, maybe? Like, what do you think?
Well, I mean, you can't ultimately separate your identity from what you do. We are our behavior. So if you spend all day doing a thing, you're going to identify with it. But it is important to be able to try to separate yourself from that, and always be open to the possibility that what you've been doing, maybe could be upgraded. Let's put it that way. People need a different reward, and that's really difficult. I just dropped a science fiction novel. I had read about 1/3 of it, and I thought it was terrible, and I put it down and happened to notice the reviews. And the reviews there were hundreds of 4 and 5 star ratings and reviews for this novel. And I couldn't get over the thought that this author is out there thinking, I am doing such a good job. I am a good writer of novels.
Yeah.
The reward of that feedback is very potent. That author has absolutely no reason to change what they're doing, even though I think it's objectively clear that that was not a good novel. And they need to be doing something different. So I told that story because I think that this is about reward. Every clinician has happy clients. And as long as you've got satisfied clients independently of clinical effectiveness, you are going to feel rewarded, and you're going to be strongly incentivized to continue doing whatever you're doing. Basically, what I'm saying is it doesn't matter what you're doing, as long as you're doing it with good intentions and, a warm heart and compassion, and you give your clients your time and attention and your care, you're going to have fans, and you're going to be encouraged to keep going. So the trick is change the reward.
Mm-hmm.
Start thinking in terms of something else being the reward.
I like that you say that. It doesn't matter what we're doing, it matters the reward we're getting, the interaction, the feedback, the satisfaction. I think of you, and I've followed you for years and enjoyed it and been irritated and triggered by it at different times. But I think of you as someone who makes the argument that it does matter what we think about or how we explain what we're doing. Is that a fair characterization?
When I said that it doesn't matter, I believe I meant that it doesn't matter what we do or what we think about it. We will still have fans, just like that book. And what I'm talking about here is the distinction between effectiveness and satisfaction, that clients can be satisfied completely independently of whether or not they're actually getting helped. And that's what I think that's what I meant if I said that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what we do. We'll still be encouraged to continue doing it by those satisfied clients.
Yeah,
it brings up the question. Sorry, it brings the question of this: is being satisfied the goal? Is that enough?
Nope.
And okay, say more.
Well, satisfaction is in many ways very easy to achieve. People want to be satisfied. They want to feel like they're getting their money's worth. So it's pretty easy to get them there. You're pretty much, it's just the challenge of telling people what they want to hear, and that's never hard. Actually helping people with serious chronic pain, for contrast, is really difficult. Lots of people with chronic pain are satisfied patients, but still have chronic pain. So there's a fairly wide gap between those things.
So this is one of the things that's been a challenge for me to kind of get to and focus on over the recent years with a lot of the recent research that's come up that's challenged, narratives that I used for years describing certain types of things. And I've been curious about this in talking to students as well.
Yeah.
When something, evidence comes about that seems to run counter to a narrative that somebody has used for a long time, but they're still very successful in clinic.
Yeah.
Is it really, I guess I'm speaking more of an educator, is it really valuable to try to change that narrative with them, or is it more valuable to encourage them to continue just offering compassionate care and effective work, and if they're getting good results, then continue getting good results? I mean, I guess unsure of like where that boundary is of trying to change people's minds about what's happening with what we do.
Mm-hmm. I mean, in some cases, it's probably going to be a distinction without a difference, isn't it? Some people are very happy with some clients are very happy with their relationship with a professional, regardless of whether or not they're actually improving. And changing the story about what's going on isn't going to make a difference. It might not even make a difference if there is a benefit. Why is there a benefit? May be irrelevant in some cases. If it's happening, it's happening. But there is potential harm in having bogus stories about why it's working, if it's working. So
what do you see to be some of those potential harms?
I think the most common is that there's often a story about fragility and vulnerability that just isn't true. Or about, the pathologization of asymmetry, imbalance, dysfunctional movement. This can, at the very same time that, by hook or by crook, the treatment is working somehow for some other reason. It's not because an alignment is being straightened out. It's not because a fascial distortion is being removed from someone's fascia, whatever. But it's working. Somehow it's working. And yet that patient goes forward in life with the idea that they are vulnerable to this thing. And they become, in some cases, perpetually afraid of that. I've met plenty of people who are going through their life, and spent many years avoiding certain activities because they believe that they're too fragile. This is, of course, really common with back pain. So fragilistic thinking is pretty easy to induce. And in fact, the effectiveness of treatment, if indeed it is effective, is a fantastic way to shore that up and convince people, if the narrative is bogus, but the treatment is effective, the narrative gets a big boost and can be really sticky.
Mm-hmm. I've often wondered too, is there a possibility that a scientifically inaccurate narrative about something, does this in the bigger, broader scale do anything to harm the credibility of practitioners in working with other healthcare professionals if a particular narrative, for example, has been kind of debunked by clinical research?
Yeah, I mean, just look at the state of the credibility of some of the more questionable professions. If you're constantly,
you got which ones are we thinking about?
Well, let me just go to an extreme and say, what about homeopaths? Regardless of what you think about homeopathy, it isn't taken very seriously by mainstream medicine. Now, we would probably make the case that that's justified, that they shouldn't be taking it seriously. But regardless of the merits of the argument, the point is that because the story that homeopaths tell about what they're doing and why it works seriously undermines their credibility with other professions, even if they've got very happy patients, even if somehow they are having good effects on their patients, the story that they're telling about it is very damaging to their reputation with other healthcare professionals, even other alternative healthcare professionals. I know plenty of massage therapists who are disgusted by the absurdities of claims coming from homeopaths. So it's a spectrum, and massage therapists definitely risk not being taken seriously by other healthcare professionals, specifically because of some of the pseudoscientific narratives that they spin. And this is one of the reasons that I left the profession when I had the opportunity to transition to writing. It was partly because I was embarrassed. I thought that the clutteration of pseudoscientific narratives in massage was pretty bad. It was a pretty stinky business. And I didn't like talking to my mainstream healthcare professional friends and colleagues about it. So yeah, I think there's definitely a risk of that.
If you were to kind of like take a bucket and say, what are the best currently existing science-supported narratives about why massage works in so many different instances? I mean, that's a very big kind of like a big category. But like, is there a way in which you can say, like, here are some of the key things that we do know, well supported by scientific research, about the mechanisms of effect of massage and manual therapies, mainly for pain, because I know that's your area of specialization.
Yeah.
What's kind of like the dominant accurate narratives according to science literature now?
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to point out what's wrong. Unfortunately, it's really hard to stand behind what's right, because we actually don't have good evidence-based understanding of any mechanism for massage. We barely have any understanding of an evidence-based outcome. I think probably top of the heap is that we're pretty sure, based on the evidence, actually good evidence, that anxiety and depression are blunted by massage therapy, which is not nothing. That's really significant. You think about how hard anxiety and depression can be to treat by any other means. That's pretty cool that massage therapy can do that. But that's virtually the only thing that we know for sure about the benefits of massage, and we don't know how that works. I mean, we can guess. We've got, perfectly good, plausible guesses about how that might work. The psychosocial effects of a compassionate interaction. Not hard to imagine that the power of touch might be involved somehow. But the point is, we don't actually have any clear evidence about how that works. Certainly some of your audience right now will be reeling from my cynicism that there are no other evidence-based benefits of massage. What about all kinds of evidence about the power of touch, for instance? And obviously there is some of that, but as far as good evidence, compelling and persuasive evidence of how it works, it's pretty limited. It's also pretty limited. There's pretty limited evidence that it does work. Most significantly to me, for instance, we can worship the power of touch all day long, but it's still unclear whether it has any significant effect on any kind of pain. So how excited can we really get about the power of touch when we still don't have good evidence that it treats pain, even transiently? So that's kind of a fly in the ointment.
Well, we're kind of, aren't we sort of in that same ballpark in like most other, healthcare disciplines in terms of treating pain? We just have so much uncertainty about like what works across the board in all kinds of
Hell
things.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's across the board. The fact that massage therapy lacks good evidence of efficacy for any major type of pain is that's not really a knock on massage therapy. That's a problem for all healthcare professionals trying to treat pain. It's a huge problem for physical therapists. It's a huge problem for practically everyone. Rheumatologists have some pretty good drugs that they can give to some specific patients, and the field does have it's specific examples like that. Migraineurs have some pretty good meds, things like that. So I publish a page about what works, and it lists these, what are the things that we know work. The overlap with massage is basically nil. There is no massage therapy on that page because we don't have that evidence. It can't be said with any confidence.
Yeah. And I guess as we talk about this, just for everybody to remember the caveat that absence of evidence is not evidence of absence yet. We haven't proved that it doesn't work. We just have not proved how or why it might be working in the situations where it does.
Yeah. I mean, slowly but surely evidence of absence does accumulate, and we do have some of that. For instance, massage therapy. It should be a slam dunk to say that massage therapy helps back pain, but we don't have that slam dunk. What we do have is evidence of really quite underwhelming effects on average. And so there is evidence of absence accumulating in some prominent cases. But yeah, generally, mostly we're dealing with just no evidence at all one way or the other, or what we have is just so bad and so untrustworthy that it might as well not exist.
Yeah. So kind of like going back up to, talking about the modalities and the identity and stuff, again, if you are, as a practitioner, really identified with your modality narrative or the things that you're doing, and that really works without talking about it to clients in terms of why this is doing what they're doing, I guess we still want to encourage people to do the things that they have been doing. And I'd like to hear your take on this, because I've gotten, a lot of people, when they read some of the sort of the research summaries and the analysis of, maybe there've been just a few studies, for example, that have come out saying that the method of massage in treating certain types of pain, there was a couple of studies that were looking at cervical pain in particular, and finding that the techniques used were not as important as we may have thought that they were. And I think that's led people to jump onto a narrative saying technique doesn't matter, because what we saw in these studies is like people got results with, a variety of different technique approaches. So consequently, the technique doesn't matter. But I think that also makes an illogical jump there. And I'd like to hear your take on this, because I do think the skill built with finely refined hands-on manual therapy techniques make a difference in the client's response and responsiveness to that particular intervention. So maybe it's not so much about the narrative behind that technique, but refining and building skill in a particular technique, I think, is still really valuable. I mean, do you think that's an accurate take on that?
Yeah, I think, I do. And it's because just because we don't know what the active ingredient is doesn't mean it doesn't require skill and couldn't be optimized. And to the extent that we have evidence that technique doesn't matter, what that's really saying, to spell that out a little bit more, is the techniques that were studied and named didn't matter. But I suspect that all of them had technique in common, that they were all, to some extent, serving the real goal, leveraging the actual active ingredients, whatever they are. And that takes skill. I think also that regardless of exactly what you do, the richness and complexity with which it is done probably does contribute to its artfulness, to how impressive it is to the patient. So there's an example of an active ingredient. Let's imagine 3 very different techniques, but they all share one key thing. They're all intricate and detailed, and they seem to have a very smart explanation, and they're delivered with such deftness and talent and compassion, etc., that in all 3 cases, the patient is equally impressed and equally affected by being so impressed. There's technique the differences aren't what matters. What matters is what's the same in all three of those things.
Yeah. When we talk about, skepticism around narratives and research interpretations and things like that, a lot of the sort of skepticism perspective is viewed as negativity. So how do you distinguish between being cynical or negative about the profession and being like rigorous about the evidence?
I don't bother to distinguish anymore. I was saying, if you're not cynical, you're not paying attention. I don't know how any bright, compassionate person in this world could possibly avoid cynicism. If you're looking at what's going on in the world around you, if you're paying attention to the experience of people who are marginalized, for instance, you're going to get cynical. You better get cynical. And I feel the same way about the subject matter in this field. I don't know how you pay attention to it without some negativity. I've always been accused of negativity, and it's always been, 100% true and 100% ridiculous at the same time. Yeah, of course, there is an aspect to what I do that's very negative, but it's also a silly and irrelevant accusation at the same time. It doesn't matter. What matters is what's true. And trying to understand. What matters is caring about and working with people to try to find our way to something helpful. If that requires a certain amount of debunking and negativity, so be it. I don't see a contradiction.
That's I appreciate it. Yeah, I appreciate that about you, that you're unapologetically standing for the potential cost of being negative or being the debunker.
Yeah.
And I've seen you be self-reflective about that. I've read things where you reflect on that yourself and even change your mind. But what are some of the interpersonal costs, or what are some of the downsides of skepticism?
Well, I mean, I have a really obvious downside for myself commercially in that I have the strangest business plan in existence, which is I sell criticism of my customers to my customers. My customers buy criticism from me. Who does that? Who bases a newsletter, a premium newsletter, on criticizing what their audience does for a living? It's madness. And what I see all the time, and there's been a lot of heartbreak in it. This is why I thought of this as an answer to your question. What's the interpersonal cost? I mean, I'm talking about business, but I also consider many of my colleagues are like friends. And what I've seen over the years, and I've seen it many, many times, it could happen today with us. People who are fans for months, years, eventually I step on their toes and it's over. Eventually I challenge one of their core beliefs and suddenly they're not a fan anymore. And I've seen many profound cases of this. And I think and I hope that the friendship and the collegial relationship is based on a shared respect for the process of understanding how things work. But in the end, it turns out that somebody really only cared about whether or not I would have their back defending one of their core beliefs. And I've been very sad to see many relationships fall apart like that over the years. That is a very high cost to the skepticism.
Yeah. Thank you. That's tough. When does being critical or skeptical become being overly critical?
Yeah. I don't know. That's a tough one. I mean, whatever the one.
I appreciate, by the way, that you are, again, unapologetically skeptical or critical or willing to step on people's toes, because it actually allows me to be more of a champion for wonder, possibility, fascination, inspiration, and at the same time be tempered by your critiques. I mean, I teach in a fashion, at a method that has its lineage in fascial work. And at some point when you came out with your critique about fascia and you and Robert Schleip started talking back and forth a little bit, and you came back with even more detailed, I mean, you grew that document for, I think, a couple of years or so.
Still growing.
Still growing. Yeah, we went through it as a faculty in my school. It says, okay, so what are the critiques? What is, if we just set aside lineage in its own momentum for a second and the inertia of the way we see things, what do we really need to understand about what we're learning here? And I've always been super appreciative of your ability to pull on wide networks of research and find relevance. And then at some point I get off your bus because I'm not as willing to step on people's toes. I think I'm more interested in the inspirational rather than the debunking quality.
Yeah. And I've shifted gears a bit on that over time. I think it's about 2 years ago now, I finally wrote an article that I should have written 10 years ago, which is called, and you can Google for it easily, Reassurance for Massage Therapists. And the spirit of that article is basically, oh, yeah, you know, all that debunking that I've been doing for the last 15, 20 years, your profession still has value. What you do is still good. It doesn't mean all that debunking and negativity. It doesn't mean that we don't have a lot to offer. And notice how I included myself. Still think like a massage therapist. We haven't been licensed in 15 years, but it's still we. Because I care about massage and I love massage and I always have. And I realized talking to, a reader who was despairing one day, and I'd encountered that many times over the years, but it just hit me one day. Why don't I need a bunch of bullet points for readers in this position who are confronting the cognitive dissonance and despairing about their pride in their profession and their work and don't know how to proceed. I can be inspiring. So I finally wrote this article, and it's been endlessly useful. Like, since the day that I published it, like practically every day I send that link to some poor massage therapist who's out there going, oh my God, there's so many problems. And I'm like, don't worry, look at these bullet points. Yeah. So I can be positive too. And that's also partly why I don't sweat the difference between cynicism and negativity too much, and the difference between negativity and rigor. It all matters. It all matters. It's all part of the puzzle.
Tell me about humility, because there's also your confidence, and you say you're interested in what's true. True is a complicated situation.
Yeah.
How do you reconcile your focus and your commitment and your confidence about what's true with your scientific humility?
Well, I'm mostly by avoiding claims about what's true. I
think we've mentioned it 2 or 3 times already in the conversation, though.
You've
said I'm interested in what's true.
Yep. I am. It's just a really hard place to get to.
How do you discern what's true, let's say?
There's a really direct answer to one aspect of this question somewhere on my website, where I talk about what does it take to convince me? What evidence do I consider to be adequate? And I really spell it out, like very specific, this much evidence of this type. So for certain questions that are subject to research that can be answered by scientific inquiry, by rigorous study, I have pretty clear criteria for what qualifies. And of course, all knowledge is provisional. So it's critical always to bear in mind that when you think that you've arrived at something that is quote unquote true, we are talking about an estimate of probability of truth. We're talking about I'm 80 or 90 or 98% sure. I am 99.9% sure that the sun will come up tomorrow. Some things you can be more sure of than others. In this business, I probably rarely exceed 80% on any specific point. There's
80% of
80% confidence.
okay.
Very roughly, obviously, you can't really quantify that. But yeah, I try to cap my confidence in anything at roughly that, because there's so much room for doubt and question.
There was that famous.
Go ahead, Rudy. Go
I
ahead.
was going to say there's that famous quote, and I cannot remember the person, and I cannot remember the quote exactly, but he was a medical school educator who said to his medical school students at some point that yes, but in 5 years, roughly 50% of what we've been teaching you here in medical school will be proven to not be true. Problem is we don't know which 50%, and I think that's kind of where some of that's living.
Yeah. I have very high confidence in the untruth of quite a few things. My confidence is higher with when I'm operating my bullshit detector. That scale goes higher. But as far as what replaces it, as far as knowing what actually does work or is true about how things work, that's much harder.
So then playing a constructive role is probably more challenging.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yes, it really, really does. It's a problem for all of healthcare, I think, but particularly for the care of aches, pains, and injuries, and particularly for the care of unexplained medical symptoms and strange chronic illnesses and so on. It's really, really difficult because we don't have the answers, and we probably won't for quite a while. Something like long COVID, we know it's a real phenomenon, but we truly lack good understanding of what's going on there. So how can you be, inspiring when you really don't know? And I think there's a tendency with both the public and clinicians in different ways to assume that this pain and injury stuff, that rehab and pain medicine should be relatively straightforward and easy, that the answers must exist, that we must have them already. And so there's a tendency in our field to just assume that we're working towards what surely must be known. We must know what to do about this, right? If you compare that with, say, doctors and scientists who are trying to figure out how to cure very serious terminal diseases, and they simply don't know the answers, how do they stay inspired? Right? We tend to be powered by the conviction that we can do something, that our magic hands are going to be useful to people. But in other parts of healthcare where mystery and being stumped is more taken for granted, they're inspired by the challenge, by the challenge of solving a very difficult puzzle over many, many years. And we need to be more inspired by that. We need to be more inspired by the mystery.
Well, one of the things that I've often pondered about, I'm curious to hear your take on this too, in terms of, again, looking back at the whole role of skepticism and understanding that it's healthy to critique the things that we do. I've often felt that one of the reasons that we have such a hard time with that in our field of massage and manual therapy is that our educational system is really built on a lineage model. It's not built on a rigorous academic model. For example, when I was in graduate school, there's just an underlying constant running narrative. You question things that are out there in the research, and the research is used to question things that were out there in the research and the things that were out there with established ideas. But in a lineage model of education, which happens in our field, which is I learned from this teacher and they learned from that teacher, and that person learned from that teacher who was taught by the great guru who was at the top and said, this is all true. This works. This is why this works. It's much harder to get that whole sense of healthy skepticism being a good thing when that educational model is your foundation.
Yeah, and it requires challenging a guru and a tribe rather than just an idea.
Yeah.
is quite different. People, I think, underestimate the degree to which it's really true that a scientist tries to disprove their own hypotheses. That falsification is the beating heart of the scientific method. And of course, that's difficult for scientists to do. That doesn't mean that they succeed at it all the time. In fact, they routinely fail at it. But it is the actual goal. And in the same spirit, we need to be very humble. We need to basically be trying to disprove our own hypotheses about what works. We need to be not believing our own success stories. Or our stories about why they are success stories, in the same spirit that a scientist tries to disprove their own theories.
Yeah. So, for me as an educator, this is something that's very close to my heart, of focusing a great deal on, and I'm interested to hear your take on this. If you could kind of say, like, here's what we really need to be doing, here's how we need to be teaching our professionals in this field. What are we really missing in terms of teaching massage therapists in their entry-level training about how to be scientifically literate, and both critical at the same time, but not not getting caught up in the understanding that critique is good, that this is a healthy educational dialogue and debate process that helps us get better at what we're doing.
Mm-hmm. How do we do that?
Yeah.
How do we fix education?
Yeah, that's an easy one, right?
Well, how about a two-pronged approach, which will hopefully capture the whole audience with some overlap in the middle. We need more art and more science, both. I think in the lineage model's eminence-based medicine is kind of the worst of both worlds in many ways. We need art in the sense that I think that the main thing that massage therapy has to offer, independently of whether or not it's even effective, is that it can be a wonderful, pleasurable, novel sensory experience, and that has value independently of anything else. And that's
just sorry, I love that. But you're saying it has value, and I imagine that ranks right alongside your value on truth.
Sure.
That the experiential value of massage as an art form has a certain value or truth to it, as well as the evidence basis, you're saying, for some of the explanations.
Absolutely. Yeah. On an aesthetic and subjective level, the pleasurable quality of a sensory experience has, at the minimum, inherent value, because things that are aesthetically valuable are valuable independently of anything else. That they're valuable if we say they're valuable, and almost by definition, a pleasurable experience is valuable.
Maybe that's behind a bunch of these debates, that distinction that you've just named.
I think so. Yeah, it comes up for me a lot. I think this is not an unusual thing for me to be thinking about.
Yeah.
One of the reasons that I love massage is that it has independent aesthetic value to people, regardless of anything else. And that to me, that's a fantastic reason to be in the profession and continue doing what you're doing. It's also a fantastic reason to try to use this to answer Whitney's question. It's a reason to teach artfulness in massage. It's a reason to teach people how to deliver a delicious sensory experience to every client, and not waste any time, with no pain, no gain approaches based on flawed narratives about what you're doing. Instead, put the effort into the artistry of it. Make massage therapy school more like art school. Make it about learning how to be creative. One of the best classes and best instructors I had in massage therapy college, and it will be surprised, many people who are familiar with my work will be surprised to hear this, but my favorite teacher was arguably also the biggest flake on the faculty, because she was an artist and because she was brilliantly creative in her approach to therapy and her approach to the psychosocial relationship with clients. And that was what attracted me to her. At the same time, this dichotomy, I think we need way more science. I think that the real challenge of helping people with particularly chronic pain is not what most people signed up for. It's not a body mechanic job. It's about biology and medicine. And ideally, we would have doctor-like massage therapists with, full understanding of physiology and pathology, who also happen to be skilled artists at touch therapy. That would be the ideal, sort of a completely fanciful future massage therapist. Would be a doctor of massage therapy who is both highly artful and extremely familiar with physiology and pathology. Because I think that the problem is basically the problem of pain, is way harder than most of what we're teaching gives it credit for. And the only defense is aggressive learning. You've got to learn as much as possible about how physiology and pathology works. Way more complicated and nuanced than anything that is conventional in the field today.
Mm-hmm. That's a ambitious undertaking. I like the idea, but that's that's an appropriate answer to how do we fix education too. So
yes, sir. Yeah, big question, big answer.
Yeah. But you got to have some pie in the sky kinds of ideals about it, at least what to shoot for, and then if we get part of the way there, then that's still going to be helpful.
Yeah, aim in the direction of more science. Yeah.
Yeah. So as we kind of are coming around to wrap up and land the plane here, just a couple other things that I wanted to maybe just touch base on. I think you mentioned a few times before too of watching for, some of the things that might be tripping up people in terms of selecting courses, methodologies, and things that they're looking for. Do you have kind of just a brief bullet point list of red flags, things that you would tell a therapist to be careful and watching for in marketing language, for example, about courses and things like that out there that might not be sharing, let's say, the most accurate, relevant kinds of approaches?
Oh, red flags for courses that aren't such a good idea.
Yeah. Be cautious of this. Be cautious of those kinds of claims, descriptors, and things like that.
Yeah, I think you're probably we're mostly just talking about the bullet point list of things that are signs of commercialization. Commercialization of methods and ideas isn't inherently wrong, but it is extremely prone to failure and abuse. So much so that commercialization is almost effectively synonymous with corruption and bogosity. It's the more that something appears to have been successfully commercialized, the more concerned you should be. And so every conceivable sign of successful commercialization, those are your red flags. But particularly the brightest red for anything that is clearly tied to a personality or to the idea of eminence-based medicine, that excellence is embodied in a specific human, or that the excellence of their ideas is specific to a specific person. The more prominent a leader or guru or influencer personality that's associated with a modality, the more concerned you should be, because it basically never goes well. There are a handful of exceptions. It's very rare for it to go any other way. So that's a big one.
And I think sometimes that can also get challenging in that what people often seek in their continuing education experiences is a class with X person, maybe because that person is a really good teacher, not necessarily because they are identifying themselves as the head of the modality empire, whatever it is, but because they're actually a really good teacher and sharer of knowledge and inspiring students and all that kind of stuff. So I think that's just to make the point too, that just because an individual has, a lot of, focus on, if there's focus on that particular individual, it might be because they're good at what they're doing. So
yeah, they could be like, for instance, a good writer.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I see this happening, right? I see a certain amount of hero worship in some of my readers, and they think that I'm right because I'm so good at saying stuff with my keyboard. And of course, that's not necessarily true. Just because I'm good at representing ideas doesn't mean they're right. And we see this all the time in the industry. And that's just that's just tough to tease apart. And there's no real formula for, how do you tell if that's a guru or just a good teacher? It's there are signs, but that's a tricky one. And probably to answer the spirit of your question more on the nose, though, the main thing to watch out for is signs of structuralism, which is the excessive focus on the mechanical character of pain. Anything that is basically derived from a strong focus on the body being like a machine that breaks down. Anything that's leaning on any kind of mechanical or physical metaphor is more likely to be a problem, because just very broadly speaking, biochemistry and physiology and pathology are much, much more significant and relevant to how pain works. So beware of the biomechanical metaphors.
But wouldn't you also say that there is a place where that kind of thing is particularly relevant, like when an individual sprains an ankle because they turn their foot inward too far? It's pretty obvious what that is, and that is a biomechanical overload on that particular structure. So
it's obviously we are structural beings. We do exist in 3D space. So but it's a matter of extremes, and as I've been saying for many, many years, it's structuralism is the excessive focus, not any focus, but the excessive focus on alignment and movement dysfunctions, attributing, connecting the dots. Whenever you're spinning a tale about causality that links two things that are, not immediately adjacent, like hypothesizing that something going on in the foot is the reason that you've got back pain. There's, some obvious anatomical leaps there. That's when you're starting to get into excessive focus.
Yeah. Well, this is a lot of food for thought here. And Paul, thanks so much for sharing some wonderful ideas and concepts with us here. How can people, first of all, let me just say, putting in a plug, there's an absolute humongous wealth of information on your website at painscience.com. And I'm going to just then turn that over to you too. Where can people interact with you more, find more about what you're doing there? I'm sure that's a good place to start.
Sure. I have a tendency to forget to promote my own work. So thank you for reminding me and inviting me. Painscience.com is where I do most of my work, and I've published coming up on about 2 million words worth of articles and books there. I make my living by selling some of the books, and I now also have a membership program, which gives my patrons and a few awesome, brave people who are willing to face the possibility of having their beliefs criticized in their inbox, gives them an opportunity to get access to some of my best stuff. So I would encourage people to, if you're serious about this stuff, if you really want to nerd out with me, that's the best way to do it, and to encourage me to keep going, keep doing what I do. Because it doesn't, these servers, they don't pay for themselves. I hang out on social media quite a bit. I do not love any social media platform, but I am tied by necessity to them. And I hang out on Facebook quite a lot. And the Facebook community, the Facebook page for Pain Science, is actually quite active and has been for a long, long time. Active, I mean, has a good community. lots of really great people show up and comment on posts. Much more marginally, I'm also on Blue Sky and Threads, and I still have a toehold on the bad place, X. You can still find me there, although not a week goes by when I don't think maybe this is my last week on X.
Yeah.
So those are my socials, and the website, painscience.com, with hundreds of topics and subtopics covered, although shockingly many still to go.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Paul. Again, thank you for the role you play in our profession, and the things you've provoked me to think about, even when I want to argue with you just because of your tone. I love digging in and seeing what it is that you're referencing and saying, and this caused me to think through some things really well for myself. So appreciate that.
And you're welcome to argue with me.
Yeah.
Great. And we'll thank our sponsors for helping us bring our message to you. The Thinking Practitioner podcast is proudly supported by ABMP, Associated Bodywork and Massage Professionals, the premier association for dedicated massage and bodywork practitioners like you. When you join ABMP, you're not just getting industry-leading liability insurance, you're gaining practical resources designed to support your career. From free top-tier continuing education and quick reference apps like Pocket Pathology and 5-Minute Muscles, ABMP equips you with the tools you need to succeed and grow your practice.
And ABMP is committed to elevating the profession with expert voices, fresh perspectives, and invaluable insights through CE courses, the ABMP podcast, and Massage and Bodywork magazine, featuring industry leaders like my co-host Till and myself. Thinking Practitioner listeners like you can get exclusive savings on ABMP membership at abmp.com/thinking. So join the best and expect more from your professional association. We would like to say thanks to all of our listeners, those who've been hanging out with us, and thank you again to our sponsors and everybody who's been part of the show. You can stop by our sites for the video, show notes, transcripts, and any extras. You can find that over on my site at academyofclinicalmassage.com. Till, where can they find that for you?
My site, advanced-trainings.com. Whitney and I want to hear your ideas and input about the show. Just email us, info@thethinkingpractitioner.com, or look for us on social media, YouTube, etc. Just under our names. My name, Till, Luchau, Whitney. Who are you?
Whitney Lowe over on socials most of these days. You can find me over there as well. And we would really appreciate it if you would rate us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. It actually does really help other people find the show and keep us going here. So please take a few seconds to do that. We'd really appreciate it. And thanks as always for sharing the word, telling a friend. Paul, thanks again so much for being with us today. And we'll look forward to seeing you all in the next one.
Thanks very much, Jill and Whitney. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.